This is the Daily Tech News for Wednesday, January 15th, 2025. We tell you what you need to know, follow up on the context of those stories, and help each other understand.
Today, Andrew Main tells us about NVIDIA's Cosmos platform, and Josh explains a new tech name trend coming from Japan.
I'm Tom Merritt.
I'm Jenn Cutter.
And it's so good to have you here. I'm going to break format just for a second because Jenn will be joining me on Wednesdays on the briefing. Thank you, Jenn.
I love Wednesdays.
I think everyone's going to love Wednesdays now. So get used to that. But let's start right now with what you need to know in the big story. It's not so much that the possible shutdown of TikTok in the U.S. makes it the biggest story of the day that puts this at the top, but that there's so many little complexities with this story that if you really want to understand it, it's going to take us a little more time to explain. Now, most of you know that there's a law in the U.S. that would block the distribution of TikTok if ByteDance doesn't sell it to a U.S. owner. The deadline for that is January 19th. Yesterday, we mentioned that Senator Markey has proposed extending that deadline by 9 months, but so far that bill hasn't made any progress. It's possible that the incoming presidential administration could do things like not enforce the law or give a 90-day extension, which is provided for in the law, but those aren't for sure. And we're also waiting for the U.S. Supreme Court to weigh in on this, which might have happened by the time you hear this. If the Supreme Court issues a stay or rules in TikTok's favor, then the rest of this is moot. But if they don't, here's what's next. The law itself only requires app stores to stop distributing the app and its updates, and it also prohibits domestic web hosts from hosting TikTok, but that's not an issue right now. The service could keep going. If you're an existing TikTok app user, if TikTok doesn't shut off the service on January 19th, even if the block goes into place, you'd be able to keep using TikTok. However, a source told Reuters that ByteDance plans to shut off access in the U.S. on Sunday, the deadline, unless it gets a reprieve from the law. It doesn't have to do that. Sounds like it's going to anyway. On the other hand, Reuters got hold of a memo to U.S. TikTok employees that said, and here I'm going to quote, "I want to reinforce that as employees in the U.S., your employment, pay, and benefits are secure, and our offices will remain open even if this situation hasn't been resolved before the January 19th deadline." It goes on to add, quoting again, "Our leadership team remains laser focused on planning for various scenarios and continuing to plan the way forward." So they're not telling everybody like, we're going to lay off on January 19th. They're telling employees like, hang in there, we've got a plan. Now that implies that TikTok will keep U.S. employees busy with something. Maybe they know something we don't. Maybe they're going to divest after all. Maybe it's just going to be reassigning all the TikTok employees to Lemonade, which is also owned by ByteDance. In the meantime, The Verge and others have posted instructions for U.S. users to save their videos from TikTok before the shutdown happens. If you're concerned about that, you can find good instructions there. Conceivably, you could VPN to Toronto and still access the service, though it's not impossible that TikTok could block based on account creation location, not just where you're accessing from. So that may or may not work. Meanwhile, Meta and Google are eagerly anticipating a windfall if a block goes into place. According to Tech in Asia, Instagram is projected to capture 22.4% of the ad spending meant for TikTok in the U.S. Facebook will get 17.1%, and YouTube around 10.7%. I'm curious, Jenn, with you sitting in Toronto, where I would have to VPN to potentially, how does this look from the outside?
Well, as a Canadian and a lot of Canadian content creator friends, we are really curious to see how far views plummet when we lose our American audience, because for most of us, most of our audience is American. Mm-hmm. And we don't even know what Canada's going to do because we're likely facing an election and we're already fighting with TikTok in terms of kicking out their head office.
Aha. Yeah. So it's not good there either. And the halo effect could make it essentially unusable is what you're saying. That's interesting.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Now, DTNS is made possible by you, the listener, thanks to Carmine Bailey, Vince Power, Chris Beneteau, and our new patrons, Paul, Daniel, Andrew, Ken, Leith or Leety, I'm not sure how they want their Leet speak pronounced, Benjamin and Bella.
Yay, new patrons. There's more we need to know today. Let's get to the briefs.
Google is folding its Gemini experience into its workspace, business, and enterprise plans. You won't need to pay the extra $20 to $30 per month per user per month to access the Gemini side panel in Gmail or Drive. They're also bumping up users to Gemini Advanced with 1.5 Pro. And they're also raising the price of the workspace plans. So the edition doesn't come for free, but it is less expensive than it would have been to add on. The price increases vary by plan, but they look to be around $2 per user. Existing customers won't pay the new rate until after March 17th, so happy St. Patrick's Day.
Yeah, get your Guinness, your Jamesons, and your workspace price increase. But it is nice that it's just coming in. They're probably going to raise those prices eventually anyway.
Mm-hmm.
This is one of those cup half full, cup half empty stories. DJI is ending its voluntary controls that automatically geofence its drones from flying into restricted spaces in the US. If you try to fly to one, it just won't do it. It's replacing those controls with the US FAA mandated remote ID system. This is what the government says they have to do. They were just voluntarily doing the geofence stuff. Remote ID publicly broadcasts the location of the drone and its operator, letting authorities enforce the rules. If you do try to fly into a restricted space, they'll know you're doing it. They'll know where you are. This is aligned with what most aviation authorities around the world are doing. They're doing this in the EU as well. DJI will still alert users if their drone is about to fly into a restricted space. They're not required to do that either, but they will. But they will no longer prevent the drone from doing so. So you could look at this as DJI reducing the safety of its drones, or you could look at it as DJI just saying, this is the law. We were over complying before. We're going to go into strict compliance, just like our competitors do. And even still doing a little more with those alerts. It's worth noting that DJI is also facing import restrictions in the US if it can't prove it's not a security risk. So that might play into their calculations here as well.
The U.S. has been requiring makers of the tools used to make chips to get a license if it wants to sell them to certain Chinese companies. It can do that because the intellectual property used in chip-making tools come from U.S. companies. The Netherlands have gone a step further. Starting on April 1st, the Netherlands will require makers of specific measuring and inspection equipment, like ASML, to apply for a Dutch license to export them.
Yeah, so getting stricter there. Court cases continue to determine how existing copyright laws in the U.S. apply to using copyrighted material to train things like large language models. And Tuesday, I thought this was interesting, lawyers for Microsoft and OpenAI argued that claims made by publishers led by the New York Times should be tossed because of the statute of limitations. In other words, the Times took 3 years from when OpenAI disclosed that its content was used for training. It was 2020 when they disclosed that. And the New York Times didn't bring its complaint until 2023. And OpenAI and Microsoft are saying that's too long. 79-year-old U.S. District Judge Sidney Stein did not immediately rule on the motion, but this was interesting too. Courthouse News Service says he, and I'll quote from Courthouse News Service, spoke with a familiarity on the underlying technology and asked hypothetical questions about chatbots responding to prompts. So it seems like he understands what he's talking about there and hopefully can make an informed ruling.
A couple of Microsoft-related stories to note. Microsoft will no longer support Office apps on Windows 10 after October 14th. They'll keep working after that date, but Microsoft won't be making sure they work or providing updates. And Microsoft is adding pay-as-you-go AI agents to commercial users of the free version of its Copilot chatbot.
PixelFed, which uses the ActivityPub protocol, it's the same one Mastodon uses, to make an image sharing service. A lot of people compare it to Instagram, is launching mobile apps. PixelFed is ad-free. It's open source. It's decentralized. It defaults to chronological feeds, which a lot of people say they like. The apps are free to use. They don't collect user data. And you could still use PixelFed on the web or through third-party apps. But now they have their own apps.
It's not necessarily news anymore that someone made Doom run on something that probably shouldn't, but people are making Doom run on everything, so we're letting you know that Doom has been made to run inside a PDF. Not so much because it happened, but because of the headline TechSpot wrote. And I quote, "Latest Doom port runs inside a PDF document, but performance is limited." Yes, we've reached the phase where Doom runs on so many things that we can judge how well it runs.
Yes, you can run Doom on it, but how well can you run it on Doom? That's funny. Digital Trends has a last interesting product out of CES that caught my eye called Swip It with 2 P's and 2 T's. Or maybe it's Swipe It. It's got an I though, so it's definitely not Swap It, although that would make sense as well. The product is a hub and a phone case. You buy them separately. The case has a 3,300 milliamp hour battery, so not enough to fully charge your phone, but it could top it up. That also adds some bulk to your phone to get that battery in it. It's going to make your phone a little bigger. The hub is where it gets interesting. It contains 5 replacement batteries for the case. When the battery in the case runs low, you put the phone in the hub for 2 seconds and it swaps the depleted battery in the case with a fresh one that is fully charged. The old battery then goes into the queue to charge up. The hub will cost you $450. Cases are $120 each. If you need them for multiple phones, you can buy multiples and still swap them in one hub. They're available now to pre-order for the iPhone 14, 15, and 16 shipping in June, and Android cases are coming later in 2025.
ChatGPT is getting a few new features. Paid subscribers get a feature called Tasks that let you tell the chatbot when you need something done on a specific time, like a daily weather report at 8 a.m. To use the feature, select the model 4.0 with scheduled tasks. And a feature in beta in India and the US lets you sign up for a free version of ChatGPT with only a phone number. You'll only need an email if you want to upgrade to a paid version.
All right, folks, those are the essentials for today. Let's dive a little deeper in some ongoing stories. Do some follow-up.
The winner of Best of CES was a World Foundation model, and Tom wanted to know a little more about what that is, so he found someone in the know to ask about it.
So I'm talking with Andrew Main, the host of The Attention Mechanism. Andrew, thanks for joining us.
My pleasure, Tom.
Okay, so NVIDIA announced this Cosmos World Foundation models. There's multiple models, lots of models. Cosmos WFM, you may see it called as well. It won Best of CES. But let's start with what it is. What is a World Foundation model?
So a World Foundation model, the concept's actually kind of simple. It's anytime basically in software or in memory or whatever inside a computer that you have some model of a world in which you may want some embodied system like a robot or something else to interact with, or it could even be, predicting weather. Let's say if you want to figure precipitation. So a world model could be as simple as, a spreadsheet with a bunch of data about, climate and, altitudes and things like this. And then you can run, some program through it that then makes a prediction based upon it. So just literally think about it as a model of the world, and a foundation model is like some base thing upon which you can build upon that.
Yeah. So like a simulation?
Like literally Sims.
Yeah.
Sims could be arguably a World Foundation, model.
Gotcha. So what is NVIDIA doing here? How is its entry into this space significant or different or anything?
I would say that, for context, it's a category of thing that certainly caught a lot of attention because they said, hey, this is what it's used for. There have been other systems like it before. Many of your new generative video systems that we've seen, a number of them are trying to do physics. And as we've watched, VO2, which is fantastic, we've seen Kling, we've seen Sora, we see these systems. A number of them, what they're also trying to do is model physics. And, Sora is a World Foundation modeling system. It's basically
Sora is the OpenAI video creation.
Yes,
one.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. That was that. Prior to that, several years ago, remember OpenAI Gym?
No, I don't.
So that was an environment where basically AIs could run around and, have embodied in like a game space and compete with each other and play games. And so, and that's been, again, that's just, we've been doing this since, people have been doing this in the 60s. And so what was interesting about NVIDIA doing this is they've made it freely available. They've made Cosmos, which looks like it's, a very, very, a pretty nimble, not a huge model, but a pretty nimble model. And they showcased, hey, this is how you would simulate a factory, right? And it's not just generating images. There's physics involved there too. So the objects have, physical thing to them. I think that's sort of a step up from these other video generator models, is that they don't just generate nice pictures, is that, Cosmos is also designed to have physics and structure and textures and these kinds of things with it. So the utility of this is, NVIDIA's in the game of selling GPUs, and they see one of their new frontiers is going to be robotics. That's why they've come out with a lot of, specifically devices that you can put into a robot to embody them and run smaller models. But to get those robots to be able to interact with our world, they need data and how to do that. And the problem is a lot of robotics companies had to deal with for years and still struggle with this. We could sit down and we could design a really cool robot on the workbench, right?
Sure.
Get the mechanics right, get everything right. We put it into a warehouse and it walks right into the shelves and knocks it over because we forgot it can't see gray or something else. You put in a world model and say, okay, I'm going to try to describe the world to the best of my ability, to the amount of compute I have. Now I'm going to take the brains and I'm going to let them virtually go through this world model. And I'm going to run 10,000 simulations. And I'm going to try to see all these different things that would, might be problematic for it. Then I'll put it into the real world. And so by the time I get to the real world, I'm not going to solve for every edge case, but I'm going to roll out thousands of other similar cases. This is why Waymo and like other self-driving car companies, they will use simulation, then use real world data. And so this is a thing that's done in autonomous vehicles for years. When you drive a Tesla has its own sort of world model that builds up from the data it gets around the world. Tesla Dojo, these are systems which you train these systems.
So a lot of people probably think, oh, it's NVIDIA, it's physics, it's video games. And I guess it stems out of that. But what they're creating here is a way for any company that wants to train robotics, not just a robot like, that's rolling around a warehouse. Obviously, it sounds like it could do that, but anything that needs to move autonomously in an environment. So that includes the autonomous vehicles and things like that. They're making this open. It's not open source, but it's open. You can use it for your own commercial purposes without giving NVIDIA any money. Are they just hoping people use their GPUs to train it? Is that why they do it?
Yeah. I mean, they're downstream for them is, and there's never my thesis is that once you really start to accelerate the economy with AI, there's never going to be enough people, never going to be enough GPUs, and NVIDIA is going to be busy for a very, very long time building and creating GPUs. And any new use case is great for them. And maybe if there's an entire new category of industrial robotics that opens up because of this, even if they only got 20% of the market, that's a new market that's for them. And so NVIDIA has been spending huge amounts of money right now developing things that are like they're the most expensive, show and tell company in the world now. Sometimes people criticize and say, like, you took it this far, but not further into fully productize it. And the goal is to inspire people. But sometimes people who are working in adjacent areas are like, well, I'm having trouble getting funding now because people think NVIDIA is just going to go into this. But, they're doing amazing things. I think that things like this, it's got people excited and people thinking about this intersection of robotics and world models, because that's what's going to accelerate robotics in the next couple of years. We're going to see rapid development now because if you were, Boston Dynamics, and every time you put your thing on the factory floor or the test floor, and there was, a 1 in 2 chance it was going to trip over because it didn't see a thing, and you had to put it back on the bench for 3 days, that slowed you down. Really good world models speed you up.
Yeah. So who else besides NVIDIA is doing this kind of thing, this World Foundation model?
Well, I mean, there's been like I said, Sora. If you read the paper on Sora is actually trying to do that. Google's been working on this. DeepMind's been working on areas of this. There's different kinds of stuff. If you take a look at, you could arguably say in a sense like an AlphaFold or something that predicts protein sequences and stuff, is these are people trying to gear up to try to do like world modeling within a cell, world modeling with an organ. It doesn't just have to be physically our world. It can be another environment. Semiconductor design, things like this. So it's a very big area, but now the phrase is something people now we understand this category of what this is.
So it sounds like not too many others are doing it the way that NVIDIA is doing it, where they're just releasing this, huh?
Yeah, I would say that being explicitly saying we've built a system for doing this, the last time there was like, to my recollection, would have been when OpenAI released OpenAI Gym, which was their software, like their environment where you can test things.
Gotcha.
And people have been using, by the way, too, game engines for doing this. Roboticists and stuff have been using game engines to test these things out. So, but that was what was neat about the demo was they're like, here's a warehouse, there's a factory warehouse, here's a driving thing.
Yeah. Andrew, thanks so much for helping us understand this. The Attention Mechanism is your podcast with Justin Robert Young, where you talk about this kind of thing all the time, including recently talking about Cosmos. Where can folks find that?
Good question, Tom. I think just do on your podcast apps, just search for Attention Mechanism. And
any other place to follow you and what you do?
AndrewMain.com.
Thanks, man.
If you have feedback about anything that gets brought up in the show, get in touch with the DTNS audience on the socials at DTNS Show on X, also known as Twitter, Instagram, and Threads, Blue Sky and Mastodon at mastodon.social. And for TikTok and YouTube for now, you can find us at Daily Tech News Show.
We end every episode of DTNS with some shared wisdom. Today, Josh helping us understand some new names for tech sites, or at least a particular tech site coming to Japan. Josh writes, "Hey, Al, in Japan, for the longest time, similar to English, to Google something has been used for searching. Guguru for Google and Guguta for Googled, etc. In a recent series of commercials for SoftBank, Perplexity is offering 1 year free of Perplexity Pro. I guess SoftBank is offering 1 year free of Perplexity Pro, and they are leaning heavily on creating a new word, papuru, or to perplexity something. Josh writes, to me, the most interesting thing about this is that they are trying to make it synonymous with a new type of search. To be the new common word for searching for something is to perplexity it. Just something else for Google to worry about. And we'll have a link to that commercial in the show notes. But yeah, that's interesting, isn't it?
Yeah, well, you can always tell when on a lot of shows when Microsoft will sponsor something, characters will say, yeah, I binged it. Which is just, it rolls off the tongue, doesn't it?
They are the only characters that say I binged it. But yes, that's how you can tell. That's a really good point. Big thanks to Andrew Main. Wait, actually, hold on. Before we thank everybody, big thanks to Jenn Cutter for the first episode of Briefing officially. Thank you for being with us. How's it feel?
It feels good. It moves quick. Everybody gets what they need to know right away.
Yeah, and don't forget, this is in the DTNS feed that you've come and known to love. If you want to hear the other show, DTNS Live, you can also get a feed of that. That has its own feed. Patrons get it all when Patreon is working properly. There have been some RSS feed hiccups that I am trying to get Patreon to fix. We're doing our best over there. But if you're not a patron and you want to get the Sarah Lane, Roger Chang, etc., that you might be familiar with from before, that is available. Just search for DTNS Live. Big thanks to Andrew Main and Josh for contributing today's show. Thank you for being along. The show's made possible by our patrons, patreon.com/DTNS. We've got that live version also on YouTube and Twitch. You can find details on all of this at dailytechnewsshow.com. Talk to you tomorrow.